A lot of people use Monday mornings, but the problem is when we show up at work Monday morning, we're in like go time. We have the most energy we will have for the week. So that's a good time to do that speculative stuff we were talking about. It's not a good time to plan because there's a bigger opportunity cost for Monday morning than there is for Friday afternoon.
You're watching Young and Profiting Podcast on YouTube. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Hala Taha, and on Young and Profiting Podcast, we investigate a new topic each week and interview some of the brightest minds in the world. Before we get started, hit the subscribe button and don't forget to click the bell icon to be notified every time we drop a new video.
Hey, Laura, welcome to Young and Profiting Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
For those of our listeners who are new listeners, Laura was actually my fourth episode. So way back 2 years ago, she was actually my first interview. Previous to that, I would have like 4 or 5 people and kind of chop it up and put narration. And Laura was my first real proper interview episode. And people loved that episode, and it gave me motivation to keep going in that interview style. So, Laura, thank you so much for taking a chance on me way back when.
Wow, I'm thrilled that I knew you when. Hey, that's great.
I know. And it's like, I'm so thankful for all, because you were a big name back then. You were still like, a best-selling author. You had a lot of different books and podcasts already, and you took a chance on me. So I'm always grateful for the people who took a chance on me, and I always invite them back to the show. The first 20 people who took a chance on me. So welcome back. And we've grown a lot since you last came on.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear it.
Yeah. So in our first episode together, episode number 4, it was called Level Up Your Time Management Skills. We really uncovered all your, expertise and advice on time management. We talked about having 168 hours in the week and how everybody has that same amount of time. We talked about tracking your time, how to be, most productive in your time. So if anyone is interested in time management, go back to episode number 4. We really covered that in depth. So this time I'm going to focus on your new topic, which is really like working from home, from what I understand. So I want to dive deep into that. And before I do that, I want to, ask you, what have you been up to the past 2 years since you last came on the show? What have you been studying? What have you been doing?
Yeah, so I did, like many people, we wound up spending a lot more time at home over the last year. And I thought that a lot of other people would be experiencing this and wondering, what do I do with this? How do I plan my days? How do I stay productive? How do I deal with distractions? How can I sort of think of my career long term if I'm going to be working from home and the sort of normal rules of the office don't apply? And so I wrote a book called The New Corner Office, which looks at exactly that question, right? Like, how can we work productively and ambitiously from home? And then, doing the normal podcasting stuff. I had another baby a year ago or so.
Oh my gosh, that's number 5 now?
Number 5 for me, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I really want to focus this episode on your work from home content. I think it's really valuable for my listeners. I think most of my listeners are working from home right now. And so it's the perfect topic. So let's start off with routines, right? What is the, benefit of having a rhythm and routine? And what's your advice in terms of designing a routine that works best for us?
Well, the upside of working from home is you tend to have a lot more control over your schedule than you might if you're in an office. Even offices that are very flexible, there's sort of a certain time where you're expected to be there and certain things you're expected to do while you're there. And it's not that you're going to get fired for leaving in the middle, but, people wonder where you're going. Whereas if you are working from home, you have a lot more autonomy over these things. And so the upside is you can experiment. The downside is that you have to be responsible for figuring out a rhythm that works for you. And so I tell people to kind of look at their time. We've talked about time tracking in the past, but keeping track of how you're spending your time, partly so you can learn, when are you most focused? When are you most productive? And that's both you personally, but then if you're dealing with anything like kids' remote schooling or anything like that, what time is available to you and what time is not available to you? Because if you know what time is available, then you can make the most of it. Whereas if you're sort of, still trying to figure this out, it's going to be very difficult. But think about, what your workday can look like to maximize your use of focused time, You want to build in an appropriate number of breaks so you can manage your energy. Think about what you do during those breaks in order to actually be rejuvenated. So not just surfing the web, but maybe get up and go for a walk or, go call a friend or something like that. And then most importantly, come up with a way to end your day. Because one of the biggest problems people have with working from home is not that they're going to watch Netflix. Like, people don't really do that. Like, there was this worry, everyone's going to watch Netflix all day. Like, no, professionals don't really do that. The bigger issue is that people don't know when to stop. Because if you could see your laptop all evening, like, you'd be like, I should be working. But like, you're not getting anything done because you're tired. And so you're like half working and half not working. You're not relaxed. You're not getting anything done. It's really the worst of all worlds. So come up with a way to indicate that your day is done, at least for now, and have that kind of goodbye every day, whether it's writing your to-do list for tomorrow, going for a fake commute, like walking around the block, but something to give yourself a little bit of permission to relax.
Yeah. And so you just brought up a fake commute. Let's talk about the start of our day. I had an episode recently where I talked about self-care and I gave the advice to go on a mock commute. So waking up, going around the block, walking your dog even, just going outside, getting some vitamin D, or even just like walking up your stairs if you live in an apartment building and don't want to go outside, but just something to kind of trigger the start of your day. So what is your opinion on a mock commute?
I think it's a great idea for many people, especially if you are relatively new to working from home. You've only been doing it for the last year or so. And the reason is that some people have, in fact, many people have more of a mental separation between home life and work life. And if you go very quickly from one to the other or go back and forth between the two, you can feel a little bit just jarred. It doesn't feel quite right, or you have trouble getting into the mindset for it. And if that is the case for you, it's not the case for everybody, but if it is the case for you, then it helps to put at least some separation between the two. So your brain knows that, okay, I am in work mode now, or later in the day, I'm in home mode now. Nobody really likes commutes. I mean, everyone hated commuting back when this was more of a thing that people did. But the one upside is it does introduce that obvious separation. So a mock commute is something that's much shorter and more pleasant, but still introduces that same separation. So yeah, the idea of walking your dog or running a quick errand or, going for a little walk, doing something that would, get you moving. But it could be as simple as having a ritual. Like, you always go and make your coffee. You have your mug that has some sort of fire you up kind of saying on it. I don't know, but take that into your workspace, sit down and have something you do first, right? That could be a way to get that same idea of a ritual that starts your day.
Yeah. And so how about getting dressed? Like, do you recommend when we're, starting our day? A lot of people are wearing pajama pants and going on these Zoom calls and they're just dressing from the top up. Like, what is your advice in terms of dressing? Because I've heard all different kinds of advice here. What's your advice on that?
Well, I probably wouldn't wear pajama pants just in case you had to get up to do something while you're on the Zoom call. And people are like, wait, those are fluffy pajama pants. That's interesting. And that maybe not the impression you are wishing to convey in that particular Zoom call. But I'm certainly totally cool with wearing jeans or even dark stretch pants or something. Something that's not going to look ridiculous if you wind up standing up and people can see you. But you can certainly be comfortable. I don't wear shoes. I know there's certainly a school of thought. It's well, you need to wear shoes to be in work mode. I don't think that's the case. I think that being comfortable is great. However, you probably don't want to be sloppy just because of people seeing you. So come up with that sweet spot between, looking presentable on Zoom, but, not feeling like you are pinching your feet into high heels. Isn't that wonderful that people have not had to do that for the last year?
I haven't worn heels in so long. And to your point, I think the only shoes I ever wear is Uggs to just go outside. I don't wear shoes either. So, and I'm plenty productive. So I agree. You don't need to wear shoes to be productive.
And people might see your pants if you stand up, but they're not going to see your feet. So you really don't need to worry about that part.
Just a pair of comfy socks is all you need.
Exactly.
Okay. So I also know that you talk about something called a Monday morning ritual. So what's a Monday morning ritual? What can we do there? I talked about it on one of your podcast episodes.
Oh boy, I'm trying to remember what I said now.
Oh, but if you don't remember.
Well, here's if I'm going to guess what past Laura might have been expounding on. I think Monday mornings are actually a really good time to carve out for your biggest value work. And ideally stuff that's more speculative, because it's how you are going to start your week with this thing that's going to fire you up. You're thinking about your career long term. It's stuff you don't have to do, but you would really like to do. Now, the problem that happens is mostly people have this speculative stuff. They're like, oh yeah, this would really advance my career. I really should make time for this. And then the time they carve out is like Friday at 3 p.m. Like, you are not going to do it at Friday at 3 p.m. Like, let's just be honest, right? You're going to slide into the weekend at that point. Or, they carve out a time. It's like, okay, if I get all my other work done on Thursday, then I'll look at this. Again, not going to happen. Dedicating Monday morning to that is when you are at your freshest, when you are starting everything off. It will probably happen because the work week emergencies probably have not yet arisen at like 8 a.m. on Monday. So I would suggest starting your week with that really big, important, speculative work that you otherwise will not make time for. And if you do this week after week, you'll make a lot of progress in your career.
Yeah, I love that. So basically, schedule your most important tasks for the week on Monday before the emergencies come up. So in your book, you talk about resisting the need to respond to all the urgent matters right away, right? So talk to us about that. Like, how do we need to change our mindset in terms of responding to all the fires at work? And how is it different now that we're living, in COVID and working from home?
Well, I think people are becoming a little bit more comfortable with this idea that they don't have to respond to everything in 2 seconds. But certainly in the first few weeks of working from home, there was that idea like, oh, my boss is going to think I'm watching Netflix if I don't respond immediately. And so people would just not get out of their inbox their entire day. And I understand the impulse or to answer all Slack messages or whatever within 5 seconds of them coming in. But there's a trade-off. Like, there's an opportunity cost for being this responsive, which is that you don't have time for that deep focused work, which is probably what you were hired to do in the first place. Like, you were probably not hired because of your rapid email response time. Like, you were probably hired because there's something that you are an expert in, that you do very well, that your organization would like you to spend your time doing. And again, my guess is that is not being in your inbox all day. So if that is the case, then every time you are spending hours in your inbox responding to everything, you are not spending hours doing those other things. And so there's a huge opportunity cost for that. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be responsive. Like, yes, you should be responsive. And especially when we are working from home, we can become a real bottleneck if we're just like, okay, well, I'm going to stop checking email completely. Like, don't do that, because then whole projects will grind to a halt as everyone is waiting for your response. But there is a big difference between, let's say, checking once an hour or once every 90 minutes or once every 2 hours for, 10, 15 minutes, responding to anything that is urgent at that point, and then being off email again for another hour. Like, there's almost nothing that has to be responded to in less than an hour. If there is, then the person needs to call you, right? If it's email, then by definition, they are not expecting a response they may be, but they shouldn't be in an hour. So give yourself that hour out of your inbox, that hour when you are not being responsive, when you can be more proactive, and you'll be getting a lot more done.
Yeah. And do you think that, hour on, hour off, doesn't it take a little bit of time to kind of get settled in our work? I would recommend, and maybe you disagree, kind of batching checking your email when you're feeling like drained, or like maybe right after you eat or something like that, so that you can kind of batch that when you're not at your peak performance.
Well, I agree. And my hour off email and then check, and hour off and then check is more based on an improvement for people who are in constantly. If that is not you, if you don't suffer from that issue, then by all means, take as much time off as you can, right? So maybe check it once in mid-morning, like once around lunch, once in mid-afternoon, once before you leave for the day. Like 4 times a day would actually be great. I think that's more than enough email checks for most people. And that will allow you to have, 90 minutes or more of focused time for any sort of work. I would say that most people can't go more than about 2 hours focused on just about anything. You're going to take some sort of break, whether it's just, getting a drink of water, going to the bathroom, quick looking at something else. We can't stay focused for, 6 hours on one thing. So, it doesn't have to be less than every 2 to 3 hours to check your email.
Yeah. And I need to take my own advice because I'm the type of person who always checks my email, always checks Slack like every second. It's just ADD, I think, honestly. I need to take my own advice.
Well, it's so appealing because it's like, oh, I'm doing something productive, or I'm deleting emails. Look, I did something. I deleted emails. I mean, you didn't really do anything, but it feels like it.
Exactly. So the title of your book is The New Corner Office. Describe to us what your work environment like is at home and what is the best way to design a work environment to make us as productive as possible.
Yes, well, I have a corner office. It's a corner of my house. I've worked in this office the entire time I've lived in this house. I mean, if you are going to work from home long term, you really do need some sort of dedicated space with a window and a door that closes. And I'm not saying that it has to be a full-scale, home office with like gorgeous built-in bookcases and a full, Zoom studio or anything like that. But you need some place where you can expect that it will be quiet and where you can focus and where you, have your stuff that you use. If that means moving, it might mean moving if you plan to do this long term. The upside of the current environment is that many more people are going to be able to work from home at least 2 to 3 days per week in the future, which means that you don't have to limit your, sites of where you're going to live to the same narrow radius you might have had to in the past. So possibly you'd be able to find something that's, larger, that's got a home office in your budget because you aren't going to have to commute 5 days a week to the place that you were previously doing that for. Windows are good. You need some natural light. Otherwise, you'll just feel like you're stuck in a closet all day. Something that's comfortable. It is definitely worth getting your chair right, getting your desk height right, because, if you work from home just a couple hours a week or 1 day a week, whatever, the problem isn't so bad because you won't be there that long. But once you start working 40, 50 hours a week in the same spot, any small problems are going to get magnified so many times over. So it is worth, figuring out the ergonomics, making sure that you are comfortable, feel like you are in a neutral position. And then, you can make it into your happy place and in a way that you really can't in a cubicle at work. I mean, if there are things you wish to be looking at out that window, well, you could probably make that happen in a way that you just can't in like an office park, right? Like you are not in charge of the landscaping, whereas you are at home. You can put the decor as you want, like whatever makes you happy. Keep the temperature where you want it. I mean, that's a real big win. I always would freeze in office buildings because it's so overly air conditioned in summer, and I don't have to do that in my home office. And if you like special scents, even. That's the kind of thing like you're not going to, make it spell like gardenia blossom candle in your office at a corporate office, but in your home office, I mean, if that's your power scent, why not?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's important that wherever you work is kind of separated from where you relax, right? So like, try to avoid where you watch TV and kind of unwind for the day is what I would say, right? You don't want to be working where you relax.
Yeah, and not because you're going to be tempted to relax during work hours, because most of the time that's not actually the problem. It's that you're going to be tempted to work during the time you've set aside to relax. So yeah, as much as possible. I know a lot of people just grab the kitchen table because it was the first thing that were like, oh, it's a flat surface. Let me put my laptop there. But then you're in the center of everything. And so it's a lot harder to, have some privacy, have quiet. People come to you for stuff if there's other people in the house because you look like you're available. So you want to make yourself look less available. So coming up with some spot that is a bit more separated from everyone else is really key, as much as you can pull that off.
Yeah. So you just basically brought up distractions, right? And you're a mother of 5, that's a lot to handle while working from home. And I think you've been working from home for quite a while, since before COVID, right? So what have you learned in terms of minimizing distractions?
Well, the key thing is that anyone who is too young to care for themselves needs somebody else to care for them. You cannot be the adult in charge of young children during the hours you plan to work. Now, nothing about COVID has changed that. It's just made it a lot harder to pull off, since a lot of people's, schools have been closed or daycare situations have not been available. And so people have been trying to do both at the same time. And just as I would always tell people in the past who were saying, oh, I'd like to work from home. Is this a way to save money on childcare? I'd be like, no, you're going to feel harried and frazzled and pulled in a million directions at once. And like, guess what? People who are doing it now without childcare feel harried and frazzled and pulled in a million directions at once. So the question is, well, what can you do about that? I definitely think that if you have young kids at home, it would behoove you to hire someone in some sort of situation that you could make work, that you could trust in terms of, quarantine bubbling together. There might be money that you're not spending on commuting and traveling and things like that to get at least a few hours a day for focused work. If that's not going to happen, if you have two parents working at home, the two of you should formally trade off, right? Like one person has the morning, one person has the afternoon, or however you want to work it. But rather than having your kids come to each of you and all of you getting distracted at different points or feeling like, is this fair? Like she was, distracted less than I was today or whatever. Just say, okay, this person is in charge of the kids in the morning. This person is in charge of the kids in the afternoon. When you're not in charge, that is your focused drill down work time. You know it is available. You also know not to schedule anything important during the time when you are in charge of your kids.
Yeah. And I want to talk about productivity and to-do lists for a minute. So you are an advocate of very short to-do lists. You say 3 to 5 items max. And you also sometimes call it a to-do list. And you got that from Gretchen Rubin. So I thought that was really cute. So tell us about the to-do list. Why keep it just 3 to 5 items max?
Well, the idea of having a short to-do list is that you want your to-do list to represent things that you actually intend to do. And unfortunately, people wind up making these like 50-item to-do lists. Like you're not going to get through 50 items in a day. But the question is, well, which ones are you going to get through, right? Like, is it going to be the easiest ones, the ones that were screaming loudest, the first ones you saw? I don't know. But the odds that the ones that you do get through were the ones that absolutely had to happen today and were the most important are low. Whereas if you force yourself to prioritize to like 5 main things, like you will, in fact, get through them. Now, people are like, that seems very short. Like, this does not mean the stuff that you do every day. Like, this does not mean like, cook dinner is on the list for your 5 things for the day. It's not, if you always post something on your blog, I would say that's probably not something you'd put on your list of 5 things, because anything that's a routine, that's a habit. If you always check your email at 11 a.m., like that doesn't need to go on the to-do list for the day. This is things that are discrete tasks that are important enough to become a contract with yourself that you will get through by the end of the day. But when it is short, then you can get through it. And you start to develop this real trust in yourself that, yes, if I put it on the to-do list, it is going to happen. And the only way you can make sure of that is to keep it short, because guess what? Stuff is going to come up. Like, things are going to happen. Things are going to go wrong. People are like, oh, well, I couldn't get through everything on my to-do list because stuff happened this afternoon. New things landed on my lap. It's like, oh, imagine that. When has that ever not happened, right? Whereas if you know you've decided these 3 things absolutely do have to happen, well, you probably will get to those 3 things even when the new stuff lands on your lap too. Or even if you get called away for a personal emergency at like 2 p.m., right? You still will have been able to get through the very limited list. And that's why you want to make it very, very short. The to-do list part is more that at the end of the day, it's helpful to know, well, what have I done? And ideally, this both matches the to-do list that you created, for the day. And then you can also add anything that you did that came up in the course of the day and then celebrate that those accomplishments happened as well.
Yeah, I love that, because usually, we spend time prioritizing our tasks in the day, like at the beginning of the day, but we don't really go back and say, like, what did I accomplish today, and kind of celebrate those small wins. And I think that's probably really important mentally to kind of keep you motivated to do the same thing tomorrow and crush all your goals.
Oh, definitely. I mean, when you get through what you have set out to do, you feel this incredible sense of progress, because you don't have to keep shoving things forward to the next day. Like, oh, I didn't do that again. Let me move it to Thursday. Oh, well, didn't do it again. Move it to Friday. Oh, once it's on the list, it's done. And then you can move on to the next stuff. And so, in fact, you wind up getting more done with a short list, because once things have been done, you can move on to the next thing, as opposed to having them continually resurrect themselves day after day after day.
How about like prioritizing all of our things that we need to do? So you say write down 3 major things that we need to do every day, 3 to 5 major things. But I know all of us probably have 50, 60, 100 things that we have to get done. So what's your advice there in terms of like having all your tasks in one place and then prioritizing them? Like, do you have a system that you personally use?
Well, you could have, David Allen, the productivity author, has what he calls a someday maybe list. And so this is a kind of list of anything that's going on in your life. And certainly if you have lots of different projects going on, you could make a list of that somewhere too. I plan my life in weeks. I heartily recommend this. And I have a weekly priority list of all the things I need to sort of get to in the course of the week. And then I pull my daily tasks from that list. And so, I've got 5 things for Monday. Well, that's not everything I have to do in the week, but it's 5 that are then done. And then I know that there's a time on Tuesday for other parts of my weekly tasks. And so sometimes I will go ahead and make the entire week's to-do lists at once. Like when I plan my weeks on Friday afternoons, I look at what's coming up in the following week. What are my big tasks? All my different projects. Where do they stand? The spinning plates, like what's going to need me to push it? What's spinning without my help? What stops spinning entirely that I, need to do? What new plates do I want to add? And so then I'm sort of running through all my different tasks and, spheres of influence and figuring out, well, what needs to happen in the next week? And then I can break that down into the shorter list for each day. I never make the entire week's to-do list because, again, stuff comes up and I won't know everything that I need to do on Thursday by Friday the week before. But I can usually set at least Monday and Tuesday and half of Wednesday. And if I do that, well, now I know when most of the major stuff of the week will happen. And so there's space when things do come up too.
And so you plan out your week on Fridays. Is there a reason why you do that?
There is. I think Friday's a really good time for it. Partly it's because most people aren't doing much of consequence on Friday, particularly Friday afternoon. We're kind of sliding into the weekend at that point. It is very difficult to start anything new. So it's often wasted time. Like you're just sort of hanging around until it's like okay to leave or okay to shut your laptop down these days. So if it would be wasted time, there's no opportunity cost to now rework it for planning time. So let's make it planning time. A lot of people use Monday mornings, but the problem is when we show up at work Monday morning, we're in like go time. We have the most energy we will have for the week. So that's a good time to do that speculative stuff we were talking about. It's not a good time to plan because there's a bigger opportunity cost for Monday morning than there is for Friday afternoon. Another reason is that, some people plan Sunday night. I know that's another popular time, but other people may not be at their desks on Friday night. So if you need to, set up a meeting or get something from somebody to make the next week work, the odds are pretty good they are still at their desk at Friday afternoon. Whereas, Sunday evening at 8 p.m., you realize you want to set something up. Like, why is that person at their desk? Like, they're not doing that. So it's just in business hours, which is often helpful if you need to do things that require, reaching out during business hours. And then finally, planning on Friday for the week ahead allows us to think about our weekends. Like if you, haven't really made a plan for your weekend or thought about what you'd like to do on the weekend, having a little time on Friday afternoon to say, okay, well, what would be fun? Like, what would I like to make happen? Any logistics that need to occur? Well, now you've done it. And so you're going to have a lot more fun than if you sort of wait until Saturday morning and when nobody feels like doing anything Saturday morning and then nothing winds up happening.
Yeah. I think this is excellent advice to everybody listening. So use your to-do list to end your day and kind of close off your day. And then Friday, you've got your planning. And that also kind of signifies that the work week is over and you can like go into the weekend like fully, knowing that you've got everything planned for the next week and you can kind of close that off, shut that out of your mind and just enjoy the weekend. Because I think part of the problem in COVID is just like, everybody's just on this wheel and doesn't know when to stop working.
Yeah, definitely. No, it happens. It's good to have some demarcation and make days a little different from each other too. I encourage people to plan at least some sort of mini adventures into your life. And I know it's a lot harder these days, but maybe it's something like streaming a concert or going for a walk someplace new. But anything that will shake up your routine a little bit. Routines are great, but if life is nothing but routine, the days don't stand out for each other. So you want to do, a little thing here and there that's a little bit out of the ordinary. It makes you feel a little bit less like you're in a rut. And spend some time thinking about what those things will be, and life will feel a little bit more adventurous.
So I know that you're a proponent of thinking big, and you talk about like bucket lists, and you've got this like list of 100 dreams, right? Tell us about that. Why is it important to kind of visualize your future, to think about the things you want to accomplish and work in your life? And how does that actually help us move closer to our goals?
Well, I think it just helps our brains focus on what might be cool to do. We have time in life. Like, everybody has some amount of discretionary time. But the problem is, if we don't think we have a whole lot of time, well, we don't think about what we'd like to do with our time. And so then when time does appear, we're kind of like, just do whatever's easiest. This is why people spend the majority of their leisure time, watching TV or surfing the web, because it's the easiest thing to do. It requires very little effort, whereas, other things require more effort. And so we have to plan ahead, and so we don't do that. Making a list of 100 dreams, which is an exercise I got from a career coach named Caroline Steniza Levine, is an unedited list of anything you might want to spend more time doing in your life. So 100 items it's a bucket list, but nobody puts 100 items on their bucket list. People stop at like 20. And then they don't come back to it, right? Because it's not something that they're like, oh yeah, I should make a bucket list. And then you kind of do, and then you stop, and then, that's the end of it. But 100 items, aiming for 100 items, you not only get like those 30 countries you want to visit, like that's going to be the first 30. But then after that, you start thinking a little bit more about like, there's that park that's an hour away from us that we've, never visited, or I'd love to try this restaurant, or I'd like to learn to make a good, souffle, or I would like to try watercolors, or buy an adult coloring book, or a jigsaw puzzle. There start to be very small things that are actually quite doable, right? Because if you're like, I want to do a puzzle, well, guess what? You can make that happen very, very quickly. You can, buy one and be, delivered in 2 days or whatever. And, your leisure time over the next weekend can be spent putting together this 1,000-piece puzzle. And, you want to make it an unedited list, because we often talk ourselves out of things. Like, this is not a contract. Unlike your to-do list, this list of 100 dreams is not a contract with yourself at all. It's just things that might be cool. Maybe you'll do it. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll try things on it and decide you hate them. Good to know. Don't have to keep worrying about that anymore.
Yeah.
But, it gives an answer to the question of like, well, what should I do? Like, I have some time. What would I like to do with it? I have a little time at night after the kids go to bed, or we have some time this weekend, or we have a vacation coming up. What should we do? And so you're not racking your brain in that moment when you realize there is time about what you want to do with the time.
Yeah. So before we move on to the next topic, which is really about fostering connection in COVID and having good culture and things like that, is there anything that you didn't cover that you want to, tell my listeners in regards to productivity or time management when it comes to working from home?
I think we covered a lot. I think with everything, it's helpful to try tracking your time for a couple of days or a week, ideally, just so you get a sense of what the rhythm of your life looks like. And then you can decide what you like and what you don't like. And that's just a very helpful place to be operating from.
Yeah. I guess you just reminded me of one more question that I have for you is you mentioned designing like your ideal week, right? Why is designing your ideal week an important thing to do in your opinion?
Well, we often think about ideal days too, but a week is the cycle of life as we actually live it. So thinking about the whole of the week allows you both to think about, the work week and things you'd like to do that maybe don't have to happen daily, but might be nice to have once or twice a week in your life. It also lets you think about what an ideal weekend would look like, what sort of a formula for a good weekend would look like for you. Maybe there are things that you want to do, like you want to wake up twice during the week early to exercise, but it's not every day. And so if you were designing an ideal day, it would be hard to figure out what that would be. But when you look at the whole week, you could see something that's a little bit more reminiscent of the life that you will actually be living. But by thinking about how you'd like to spend your time, you empower yourself to get your actual schedule closer to it. So that's why we want to figure out what an ideal week would look like.
So like, for example, you could say, I want to work out 3 times a week, and I want to work out in the morning. I want to talk to my friends 5 times this week, like in an ideal week, and kind of like know all the big things that you want to do and kind of the general time frames, and then map that out. And as you schedule your life, keep that in mind. I think all of this stuff is such great advice. It's just basically taking a step back slowing down to speed up essentially so that you can, live the life that you most want to live.
It is so hard to do that with time, though, because time keeps passing regardless of what you do. And so, it's very hard to take yourself outside of it and then make conscious choices about how to direct it. But that's why we build in these like weekly planning times, or, to have a little moment to think about what my ideal week would look like. Because when you're just moving from thing to thing, it's very hard to direct it. But if you can build in times where you do step outside of the flow for a little bit, then you're far more able to make conscious choices.
Yeah. So I recently became an entrepreneur. I was working at Disney streaming services, and I started an agency. So I was able to, quit my full-time job, which has been very exciting. But one of the things that I realized at Disney as, work from home started to progress is that the team morale just went to the shitter. I'm sorry for cursing, but even for Christmas, nobody said happy holidays to each other. There was just no team morale, and everyone, didn't really talk to each other anymore other than meetings. We just lost connection, and I feel like the team morale really went down the tube. So what's your advice there in terms of keeping employees engaged and fostering healthy company cultures during this time?
Yeah, I'm really sorry that happened, because it is definitely not inevitable. And this is just something that any of your listeners who are in management really need to think about, is that your job is not just making sure that the work gets done. I mean, that's part of it, but you need people to do the work, and you want people motivated to do the work. And the only way you have that is if people have a culture that they are plugged into and feel motivated to stay part of. They feel like other people are on their team and cheering them on. So you can cultivate that, recognizing that people aren't just their jobs. One thing that people can do is start all meetings with a few minutes of social time. And I know that people are like, whoa, I don't have time for that. That sounds like such a waste of time. My meetings take too long as it is. But you put it on the agenda, right? So it's not just that awkward start of a Zoom meeting where I was like, well, is everyone here? Can we actually start? Do I have to make some comment about the weather before I dive into the real stuff? Actually put in, 5 minutes at the start where everyone says, an answer to one guided question. And, this is just a way for people to, you're hearing everyone's voice, which is good because you want a meeting to involve everyone's contributions. And so you're getting used to hearing everyone when that happens. But just lets people talk a little bit about what's going on in their lives so everyone knows where people stand at a given moment as they're about to collaborate together on something. You can do social activities virtually. The key thing is they really have to be well facilitated. Honestly, professional social events should have been facilitated in the past. They just weren't, because there's always the option to be like, okay, I'm just going to go buy my team drinks. I don't have to think about it, right? I'll just take them all out for drinks. That's great. Or take them out for dinner. Yay. Solve that problem. Whereas now you have to think about it a little bit more. But there's all kinds of things you can do. Very short, fun Zoom things, like playing Commute type trivia games, do scavenger hunts. Again, you keep it to 30 minutes, honestly, and you have a limited number of people on it. Or if you're having a fun chit chat, have it be guided. You've all read the same article and now you're discussing it together with one person leading, or you've all read the same book and now you're having a discussion with one person leading. But just, building in things like that. And then if, again, as a manager, it's your responsibility to reach out and see how people are doing. Get in the habit of calling people, just, picking up the phone and calling people so that you don't put the onus on them to reach out to you, but also people know that they're not just going to hear from you when you're in trouble. It's not that where's this report? Why didn't this happen? It's hey, how's everything going? I just want to check in, see, how did you feel after that meeting yesterday? What was your takeaway? And then, see how life is going and take that upon yourself to make sure that people as whole people feel successful.
Yeah. And I love that you said not to wait, be so worried about wasting a few minutes. And I think that really speaks to your perspective that time is abundant. And you always say that, we should approach time with an abundance mindset. Why is that? Why is it more beneficial to look at time with an abundance mindset?
Well, you just make better choices. I mean, because if you are constantly feeling like there is no time for anything, you feel rushed, you feel harried, you're not going to be open to opportunity, because how could you take on any opportunities? There's no time, there's no space for anything, right? Whereas if you tell yourself, I have all the time I need for what is important to me, well, we see what we choose to see. So if you're walking around with the story that I am harried, busy, rush, starve for time. Well, sure, you can find evidence of that. I'm sure we can all find evidence in our lives of moments that are, starved for time, rushed, harried, whatever. But if you're walking around with the story that I do have time for the things that matter to me, then you're like, oh, hey, I just got my kids in bed and I, have 90 minutes before I need to go to bed. I could read a book. I'm the kind of person who reads a book. Look at me, And if same thing with that at the start of the meeting. It's like, we have so much to get through. I have 10 meetings today. How could I possibly spend time just chatting? But here's the thing. Like, if you all trust each other and feel like you're happy together and going to have a great meeting because you all feel like you're, in it together because of this 5 minutes of chit chat at the start, well, it's going to be a much better meeting. Like, you may not have to have a second meeting because somebody just resorted to total subterfuge over something that they weren't happy about on the previous meeting. Like, it is so much better to invest the time in getting it right.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, this was such an awesome conversation. The last question I ask all my guests is, what is your secret to profiting in life? And this doesn't have to be financial. It could be anything.
Well, profiting is having extra, that there's more coming in than what is going out. And I think that this is a good way to think about our time as well, that we have more available to us, spending on things we would like to do than the things that sort of drain us and make us unhappy. And yes, there are things we have to do in life, but even so, even if you absolutely hated your job and it was 40 hours a week, there are 168 hours in a week. And so if you slept 8 hours a night, so that's 56 hours per week, 7 times 8, 56, 40 hours for work. We still have 72 hours for other things. And so you could think of yourself as, yes, I have this time going out for the work that I'm not thrilled about, but I have these 72 other hours that I can do other things with. Wow, what a profit, right? Or, maybe I can change the work too. And then I look even more profitable because I have even more of my hours that I feel, good about. And so getting yourself into a place where you feel happy about your hours is how you can profit in life.
Yeah. And to everyone listening, I highly recommend that you guys go check out episode number 4. We talk about this a lot in terms of, you have enough time for the things that you want to do. And honestly, Laura, I've taken so many of those value bombs that you shared in that episode. And I've said them so many times on other podcast interviews that I've been on when they ask me how do you have time for a side hustle? I always give that example that you still have 72 hours left after you sleep and work. And that's plenty of time, even if you have kids or whatever it is. So I love that piece of advice. And where can our listeners go to learn more about you and everything that you do?
Yeah, well, please come visit my website, which is lauravanderkam.com, just my name. And if you're looking for more podcasts to listen to, you might check out Before Breakfast, which is a short, every weekday morning, quick tip that'll just help you take your day from great to awesome.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Young and Profiting Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please write us a review or comment on your favorite platform. Nothing makes us happier than reading your reviews. We'd love to hear what you think about the show. And don't forget to share this podcast with your friends, family, and on social media. I always repost, reshare, and support those who support us. You can find me on Instagram at YAP with Hala or LinkedIn. Just search for my name. It's Hala Taha. Big thanks to the YAP team as always. This is Hala signing off.